Hi. So today I'm going to be talking about my PhD project. I'm in my first year, so we're going to start our field work this summer. So this will kind of give you a little teaser. So the background, neotropical forests are incredibly diverse, as you can see from this little sample. But it's an area that's undergoing a lot of change, primarily through deforestation, which is causing a lot of fragmentation of those forests. Additionally, despite this incredible diversity of wonderful species, many of them are poorly understood in the scientific literature, and most of the available data focuses primarily just on their breeding and feeding habits. And one of the big knowledge gaps is how these animals actually move through the landscape. So, in the area around UGA, Costa Rica, which Steve talked about earlier, and which this three-wattled bellbird is the kind of iconic conservation species, we want to do a study and understand how some of these animals are actually using the landscape and moving through it. So this is our study area. Up here, this is the bellbird biological corridor that Steve told you all about earlier, and that is UGA, Costa Rica up there. So we want to use that as kind of the base for our study and look at how animals are using this forest. And one of the key things to consider in this study area, in the upper part of the biological corridor, is there's a gradient of increasing fragmentation as you decrease in elevation. So up at the very top of the corridor, you have a lot of pretty intact forests and reserves, and as you move down, there's a lot more agriculture and the forest becomes a lot more fragmented. And this corridor is actually overseen by a council, which is actually a non-government entity. So it doesn't really have true legislative power, but they do oversee how things are going. So we want to work with that council in doing our study. So project objectives are to identify animal movement patterns and habitat use in the area, determine how changes in landscape structure impact their movement patterns. So are some of these animals actually moving differently in areas that are highly fragmented versus areas that are relatively intact? And then use that data to inform conservation planning and project the impacts of future land use decisions. Then we want to actually sit down with this biological corridor council and do some participatory mapping and have them identify places on the landscape that they think would be good targets for conservation, for reforestation, as well as areas that might be more important for farming and agricultural concerns. And then we're going to actually compare that with our biological data and assess trade-offs, identify areas of agreement as well as areas of conflict. So what we're going to start doing this summer is we're going to take these 4 species, white-nosed coati, Central American agouti, 2 small to medium-sized mammals, and then blue-throated toucanet and blue-crowned motmot, which are 2 relatively large bird species. All 4 of these species are relatively abundant in the area, so we should be able to trap them with relatively high success and get some good data. And we're going to actually trap them, attach GPS units to them, and then monitor their movements throughout the course of the summer to understand what kinds of habitat they're using and how they're moving from different locations. And then in the future, we're going to sit down and do the participatory mapping stuff that I was telling you about. That would be kind of a hypothetical example up there with people identifying certain areas as maybe key conservation targets. And we're going to compare that with the biological data that we've collected to hopefully develop a kind of comprehensive plan for management and conservation in the region that accounts for both human values and needs as well as biological data. And with that, I'd like to acknowledge my advisor, Dr. Nate Niblink, as well as my lab mates for all their help and support in developing this project, and the UGA Graduate School and the Georgia Ornithological Society for funding this project. And that's it.